Torah TV. The world is thinking.
I'm Dan Schifrin. I'm Director of Public Programs and Writer-in-Residence at the Contemporary Jewish Museum. For a while, I was the only writer-in-residence, and then Julie Seltzer showed up to write the Torah, and we've been duking it out the last 16 months. It is my privilege to introduce this final program for our exhibition As It Is Written, Project 304-805. And as you know, this conversation will feature this conversation between Julie Seltzer, our scribe at Soferet, who just finished this Torah, and her teacher and scribe, Jen Taylor Friedman. This Torah made its, transition yesterday at Congregation Nativot Shalom in Berkeley from being an object that, while already holy in some way, was still, in some sense, a work of art that was being created in a museum, to being consecrated yesterday and becoming a ritual object. And so that was extremely meaningful, and today is kind of the second part of that process. I'm going to mention a few more points about the exhibition and a program in a moment, but before I do, I wanted to welcome two very special people, Maribel and Steve Levitt, to welcome you.
You're not used to them. Yes, absolutely. Welcome all of you to what is the sort of gentle landing of this most beautiful Torah, which was referred to yesterday by the rabbi as the baby. And he was holding it like a baby, and it was it really is something that has just been born. And it was our privilege to hear about the project before it started, because we're good friends of Connie's, and we've been in this CJM enterprise together for quite a while. And we were so excited about the idea of a Torah being written by a Soferet, a female scribe, and then when we met Julie, we were knocked out. She's so fantastic and learned, and we've brought people here to. She would come off her little platform and stand and answer questions, and by the time people had asked questions and answered questions, she'd answered them. You were just, I don't know, so touched and by her scholarship and her intellect, in addition to her artistry, that I just felt so fortunate. And we're early sponsors of the project. There are many. And so here's Steve Levitt, who was the second board chairman? I don't know. Around. The second board chairman and one of the founders of the museum. And here he is, Steve Levitt.
So thank you. I just think that this deserves Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechayanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. I hope Julie is here to hear that, and all we can do, we thank her very much for lending the museum her gifts and lending the world a new Torah. Thank you.
A lot of people have asked me this already. We are taping this afternoon's conversation, and will be on our website in just a couple of days. So if you want to see it or send other people to it, check back in a few days. Also online is our teacher resource. On our teacher resource page, we will have resources related to the exhibition, including the video, the short video that was up in the alcove where Julie was writing, if any of you saw it. Which is a fascinating little sketch of Julie, as well as the process and some of the more interesting laws about writing the Torah. And the talk will be available on that page as well. I want to take a moment also to thank a couple other of our funders, the Jim Joseph Foundation, and the Goldman Foundation, who've been so generous to this project and to the museum in general. The format for today's conversation is the following. Jen and Julie and I are going to talk for a while, and then we'll have a chance to talk with you, and then we will eat and drink and be merry. So the talking part, including your questions, will be a little less than an hour, and then we'll have a chance to go out and enjoy ourselves. Please take a moment to turn off your cell phones. And I want to take a moment now to just offer a brief bio of both of our speakers today, and we'll hear more about them in the context of our conversation. Julie Seltzer spent the last 16 months writing a Torah here at the Contemporary Jewish Museum. As at Soferet, she combined her passion for Jewish text and laws, Hebrew letters, and the tradition of Jewish scribing going back many, many centuries. Before becoming a scribe, Julie Seltzer was a baker at the Isabella Friedman Center in Connecticut. Among her culinary achievements was a series of challah breads unpacking themes from weekly Torah readings. Did anyone take her class in the spring where she would bake according to the Torah portion of the week? Anyone here? Yeah, you can find pictures of that online. Jen Taylor Friedman is a post-denominational, halachically observant, egalitarian Jewish ritual scribe and scholar. She is best known as being the first woman in modern times known to have written a Sefer Torah. In 2007, the Forward magazine listed her as one of America's 50 most influential Jews. She lives in New York City and is about to start her 4th Torah. She also teaches aspiring scribes. So please welcome Jen Taylor Friedman and Julie Seltzer. Well, here we are. So, wanted to start with the question: how two nice Jewish girls get into the scribe business?
Who said we were nice?
Touche. Okay. maybe we'll let Jen go first.
We're pretty nice. Well, I got into the scribing business because I was bored with my mathematics degree, and I loved Talmud because Talmud is kind of like mathematics, only with people and much more interesting. And I liked calligraphy, and when you put Talmud and calligraphy together and elevate them a bit, what you get is the sacred scrolls. And I rather liked that I could turn a hobby and an interest into something that would touch the hearts of my community and other communities. It was very exciting. So then I studied and practiced and studied and practiced, and one thing led to another, and there I was writing Torahs. And that's the short version.
The end of our stories are very similar. This part starting with, then I practiced and studied and practiced, and one thing led to another, and there I was writing a Torah. The beginning part is a little different. I did not study mathematics. I was working as a baker. My background had been in Jewish studies, mainly in education, and I started studying about the letters and the Hebrew letters. And one day I was walking down the street and it just hit me kind of from out of the blue that I really wanted to learn how to write the Torah letters. Not that I wanted to write a Torah or anything. And then I started learning, and one thing led to another, and here I am.
Was there a moment, Julie, where you realized that writing a Torah was actually something that would be a kind of a revolutionary act as opposed to just moving further and further into study and scholarship and scribing? Was there a moment when you realized, this is more socially or politically than I had thought?
Do you mean as a woman?
Yes, as a woman.
Not exactly. I mean, there was a moment when I realized that women weren't really doing this so much, when I started learning and tried to find a teacher and got the same two names within like a 3 or 4 hour radius of where I was living, and I thought, why is it so hard to find a teacher? And that's kind of when it dawned on me that there weren't many people doing this, but it's not why I decided to do this. It's about my love for Torah. And I get that there are implications sort of from the external world. Oh, wow, you're women, and women aren't really doing this. And I think it's important, but it's not coming from a place of I want to make a political statement. It's more because I think Torah is great, and I love it, and that's why I do it.
Yeah, it's similar for me. Since I was tiny, I've done things that boys do, like I did carpentry course in school, and I did mathematics, and I did physics and chemistry, and I got downgraded in one maths class because the teacher said, well, we can't have you scoring higher than the boys. So, yeah. So I'm sort of used to being a girl who does things that boys do. And I don't do it because I like annoying people. Like, I did mathematics because I love mathematics, and I did Talmud because I love Talmud, and I got into writing because I love writing. And yeah, there were currents of this isn't something girls do, but that wasn't exactly a new message. And eventually those currents became rather stronger and became waves of disapproval. But by then I was already started, really. and I'm sorry that there are people who are upset by it, but not so sorry I'm going to stop doing it.
What part of New York City is your accent from?
Well, in New York, I'm originally from Queens. You know. Really, I'm from Southampton, England.
I'm curious about whether there's an English context that's different from an American context in terms of scribing or the connection of a woman to a project like this, or if you had grown up in New York, do you think that you would have followed along a similar path?
Gosh. If I'd grown up in New York, my life would have been very different. I don't know, I suppose as an English Jew there's a little bit more of a feeling of having to do things for yourself because there's somewhat less infrastructure to do things for you. But I don't know really. I mean, there's Julie living in Jewland, and she still bakes bread even though she can buy bread. So...
Maybe a word about your relationship and the idea of kind of mentorship, or the idea of transmitting, the knowledge from one teacher to the next, or from one generation to the next. Without going into too much detail about that process, I'm curious just how that unfolded for you, how you became a student, and again, whether it was the fact that you were both women, did that have any bearing on the way that transmission happened, or not necessarily?
You start.
Well, it's all very top secret, but I'll share a bit. When I first decided I wanted to learn, I just poked around online and bought a calligraphy pen and figured out eventually how that worked. And then a few months into it, when I was looking for a teacher, I thought, well, it would be logical to find a woman, given that it didn't seem to be traditional for women to be learning this, and so I figured if there was another woman who was already doing this, she might be willing to teach me. And so I just Googled, I don't know what I Googled, Safrud or scribing, and maybe women, and Jen Taylor Friedman's name came up, and I sent her an email. And she said, come meet me in New York City.
Where I was teaching in a classroom one day. I was borrowing a classroom and writing in it and teaching sporadically when students turned up, one day a week. And so I was there, I think it was a Tuesday, and Julie comes into the classroom looking scared as anything and looking terrified. And I know that face. It's the face people get when it's like, this is the great scribe. And this is not how I see myself. So it's like, oh no, she has the scared face. But fortunately, quite quickly, the scared face went away and I didn't see it again.
And we met once a week for a long time, for over a year.
Over a year.
Over a year.
And she went away and practiced in her free time and studied in her free time, which not all my students do. And you could see the progress in leaps and bounds. It was beautiful. And yeah. All right, and then one day, it's all right. I got a call from Connie at the museum saying, I wasn't about to spill any secrets. No, a call from Connie at the museum saying we have this project. I think she used the words "crazy project." Saying, do you know anybody who might be willing to come and write a Torah in a museum?
So then I get a phone call from Jen. I'll try to do the accent. Hi. I got a call from San Francisco.
Stop it.
They want someone to write a Torah, and I think it should be you. What?
I thought she'd be a good person to do it.
We had decided not long ago that it would be nice before our conversation went too far to actually show an image of the Torah, of what you had written, and maybe the idea of the idea of transmission or from generation to generation, teacher to student would be an apropos moment. So if we coordinated technology correctly, is it possible to bring up?
Okay, so on this page, this is one of 62. I don't know which one. I mean, I know part of what's on it. This is the may God bless you and keep you. It's the priestly blessing. It's the blessing that is also given from parents to children on Shabbat, and it's very much, I think of it as transmission of a blessing, and we've been talking about transmission of teachings, and you know, the power comes through the hands. You want to do the
Yep.
like.
So when the priest does his blessing, he holds his hands up like this with his fingers in this particular pattern. And if you look at the white space in the third column over, you see that it's sort of like fingers.
And
this is one of the bits we like because it turns the arrangement of the text into something that happens in real life. And then you can, like, look, here's a Torah scroll, but it also represents this amazing physical and metaphysical thing that happens.
And while there was no technical transmission from Jen to me, you know, via the hands on the head, there was definitely transmission of hand energy. The hands. This is what the part of our body that we use to write the Torah. Actually, not this one. This one. I'm a writer, but it's through the power of the hands that the energy is kind of transferred from above to the letters, the manifestation of the Torah in physical form. So we're kind of like the channelers, the vehicles.
And we had plenty of actual hands-on hands moments. It's like, no, hold it like this.
Yes.
No, like this. Let me hold your hand.
And it was fun because when I finished the Torah on Thursday, there were some people who were kind of helping to fill in the last letters and last week as well. And that was such a great experience. I think some people in this room got to do that. And they held my hand as I wrote the letter, so we were kind of writing the letter together. And I got to have the moment of Jen helping me also write in the letter. She held on to my hand because we weren't sure whether she'd be able to do it or not by herself. But it was very sweet. So we got to share in that moment of completion.
Thinking about the idea of hands and the body, at synagogue yesterday, Julie gave the drash, the interpretation of the Torah portion of the week, and it was really beautiful and moving. And I wondered whether you might be willing to share a little bit about kind of the comparisons you made between the Torah and, as Maribel Levitt said, the baby.
Right, the Torah and the baby. Okay, so this was the first part of the drash where the Torah portion from last week actually begins when a woman gives birth. So I thought it was very very appropriate because there are a lot of similarities between writing a Torah and having a baby. I'm not an expert in either of them, actually. I've never had a baby, and I've only written one Torah. But as far as we know,
I've never had a baby either.
So we don't know of anyone who's both had a baby and written a whole Torah. So we're all just guessing here anyway. But the process, the gestation period, is about close to 10 months for a baby, and it's similar for a Torah, though this one took just a little bit longer to emerge. And
the first one's always late.
The first one, yes, the first one's a bit late, and as I think you were mentioning before, that both the fetus and the sheets of Torah have some kind of holiness, but they don't become their full-blown selves, their full-blown beings until that moment, wherever you want to exactly place the moment where the fetus becomes a baby, its own separate entity, and a Torah goes from something that has kedusha, something that has holiness, to being an actual Torah, and it was, and we read from it, and you know, we wrap it. It weighs without its poles. It kind of weighs maybe the same as a baby, and we hold it like we cradle it in our arms, and we try not to drop it on its head, and probably the strangest comparison between having a baby and writing a Torah is the mitzvot, the commandments connected to these two. So having a baby is generally associated with the mitzvah, the commandment of pru'ervu, to be fruitful and multiply. And that's the first of 613 commandments. And writing a Torah is the last, the 613th. So they're kind of bookends to all of the commandments, all of the mitzvot. And both of them, interestingly enough, traditionally only apply to men. Now, to write a Torah, you probably heard this, that traditionally it's only applicable for men to do. And it's probably why it's taken so long for women to begin participating. But for being fruitful and multiplying, it has not taken women so long to begin participating in this one. So it just forces us to a little bit reframe how we think of obligation and participation in these mitzvot.
One question about someone had asked you, and I think you've gotten this question a lot, and maybe you've gotten this also about, you know, for instance, you must have been on a spiritual high for the year or the 16 months which you were writing this, and I'm just wondering about the balance between it being a craft and a job on the one hand, and a kind of a spiritual endeavor on the other. And I'm wondering whether either one of you would be willing to both comment on that balance, and also, if possible, to share what, if there were moments, and I'm sure there were moments, would you be willing to share any moments where there was a moment of transcendent clarity about something?
I think that as Jews living Jewish lives, we seek connections with the divine, but you can't sustain a connection with the divine for a long period because you would break. It would wear you out. So expecting somebody to be on a year-long spiritual high is expecting them to be inhuman. It wouldn't work. But what I have, speaking for myself here, is a spiritual groove. I think everybody has something that they do that when they're doing it, it just feels right. You know that this is what you want to be doing right now, and that here is a place where it's good for you to be. And for me, writing Torah is like that. So I can be having one of those mornings where you're like, don't want to work today. But then You go and you sit down and you do whatever focusy things it is that you do, and you get your quill into your hand, and you get the ink onto the parchment, and you're settling into that groove, and it feels good. And you do that several hours a day in, day out. Some days it's better, some days it's less good. Some days the groove is a bit bumpy. Some days it's just really smooth and nice. And you look back and you think, I've spent a long time in my groove. That's really great, because you can build up like the transcendent picture from lots of little bits, I think. So it's not exactly intense transcendence, but it's sort of spread out through just doing the best you can every day. And that does it for me. Don't know about you.
Yeah, I'd probably question our definition, or what we think of as a spiritual experience, that we think of it as kind of this high or something transcendent, but our daily routines can be spiritual experiences, and it doesn't have to be writing a Torah. It can be doing any activity that you're doing. If you're connecting and if you're present, then it can be a spiritual experience. And I think this was one of the teachings that came out of this year, and also from the content of the Torah. And you were just mentioning this, sort of like, you know, the lows and the hard parts, the long stretch of desert. And you know, sometimes it's lots of exciting things happening in the narrative, and other times it's just a list of names and places, and it's repeating itself. And but that's all part of it. That's, you know, just because it's, you know, boring doesn't mean it's not meaningful, or that it's not part of a broader, you know, spiritual experience. But no, certainly it was not some kind of high for 14 months or however long it took.
That said, there's a kind of connection that you can get to the letters, to the words and the text, when you spend a lot of time writing the text very slowly. And you can do this even without a scribe's training. If you go home and take out a notebook and a pencil and just write some of the text, take out a chumash, write some of the text at a nice slow pace. And it's just different than the way we read it. If you're reading it from the book for study, you read it and it's gone. Or you're listening to it in Torah reading in the synagogue and it goes through your ears and the chanting is very nice and it's gone. But the writing takes so much longer that you focus on the text in an entirely different way. And our sages say that it's somebody who writes a Sefer Torah, it's as if he himself received the Torah on Mount Sinai. And I think this is sort of what they're getting at, that if you write the text, it brings you a completely different perspective on it in a way that reading it just doesn't. And I strongly recommend experimenting with this because it's very interesting in a way that is very hard to explain without doing it. It's also very intense and very lovely. Give it a try.
Could you, maybe my last question before we open up to the audiences, could you say a little more what you mean by experiment with it? Or give it a try?
Go take a notebook, take a pencil, write some lines of Hebrew, copy them from a chumash. That's all. Focus on what you're doing. Spend like half an hour just writing the text. See what happens.
Okay, so we had agreed we wanted to bring the audience into the conversation early enough so we could have a chance to answer everyone's questions. We're having microphones coming around. One thing, if I could ask, I know there are often a lot of questions about the technical aspect about this process, about what quill do you use and where do you get the ink and so forth, all interesting and fascinating questions. But I'm hoping today, since we have both Jen and Julie here together, that we could keep some of those questions to a minimum, because a lot of that information is also on our website and elsewhere, and maybe to ask more questions about their experience and or their relationship, and let's see how that goes. So thank you for that.
I'm very curious about the Torah as an object, and curious, for example, the space you showed us that shows the hand. Now, would that appear in all Torahs, or is that something you would have the artistic license to put in?
No, this is, if I can take this, 'cause, this is sometimes referred to as art, but there's no kind of creative license here. It's very much you copy the text. Now, not every Torah has the same kind of pagination, if you will, but it'll have the same in special sections where there's spacing like this. It looks the same. We can't kind of create our own spacing.
So we have to have the white space, but the size of the white space is slightly variable, so it doesn't always look like fingers. And if you look at some older Sifrei Torah, it doesn't really look like the fingers thing. But at some point, scribes realized that, hey, if we arrange it just like this, then it will look like that. And then scribes after them seized upon it because that was brilliant and did it.
But there's rules for where there has to be space and where there can't be space. So it's not like you can just kind of, ooh, it'd be fun to make the shape of, I don't know, a star here, and then arrange it that way. And another example of very interesting spacing is the Song at the Sea, where there's kind of like a part of a line and then space and then part of a line and then the sort of the inverse, and it looks like the walls of water, the water is split, and it's called walls of water, and it looks like there's people walking through these two split sides.
I wonder, hi Julie and Jen. Brony. Here I am. I wonder, you talk about giving birth to this baby, and I wonder if you're gonna, this for you, it's just sort of projecting, and Jen, you have experience already with Sifrei Torah, if you feel like you're gonna have sort of empty nest syndrome. Are you gonna miss the Torah? Are you gonna wonder where it is at night, like if it's being careful? No, but yes. Do you think do you feel an attachment, and are you gonna wanna visit it, or are you ready to just let it off into the world?
Visiting it tends to be expensive and impractical, and scribes don't earn that much. Would that they did. But yes, you wonder what your Torah's up to. And sometimes you get an email from the rabbi being like, we were reading the Torah this week. I was happy. Those are good emails to get. I hope you will get those.
Yeah, I hope so. It's only been like 2 days, and I was with it yesterday, and now I know it's back there. So.
Yes, as an artist, I found that all calligraphy pens are made for right-handers. Is there any such thing as a left-handed scribe?
But by all means, yes, there are plenty of left-handed scribes. And indeed, Hebrew left-handed scribes have a much easier time of it because righty scribes, their hands are liable to smudge what they've already done. Lefty scribes, it's a breeze.
The lefty scribe, I don't know if they'll say it's a breeze. It's easier.
I have 2 short questions. Can this Torah be used by Orthodox synagogues? Would they use Torah written by a woman?
No. And we have a responsibility as female scribes to keep our work out of Orthodox communities.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
At least I feel that very strongly, and I hope that I pass that on to my students.
Why would that be?
Because it's like if we have a non-kosher kitchen, we wouldn't feed kosher-keeping people from our non-kosher kitchens just because human feeling says that would be a wrong thing to do.
Okay. The second question I have is, who taught you?
Well, as Jews like writing down how to do things in books. So I got books, and I'm lucky that I can learn things from books, and I also learned a little bit here from a scribe, a little bit here from a scribe, a little bit here from a scribe, and I pieced together an education over some while. And
I have a
a
mic here. So, my question is about the evolution of the Hebrew script. And when you look at the different Torahs, when did this particular style came into being, and what is the difference between a Torah of Ashkenazi Jewish community and a Sephardic?
The basic difference between the Ashkenazic and the Sephardic scripts is the instrument used to write them. The Sephardic scripts are often written with reeds. They're developed writing with reeds. Reeds have much less flexibility than quills, and they don't take a sharp edge nearly as much. So with a Sephardic script, you have less distinction between the thick and the thin lines, and they're kind of more flowy and sort of chunky is not quite the word I want. Curvy, yeah. And they have sort of bendy corners, smoothed over corners. An Ashkenazic script is designed to be written with a quill, and so it makes a very sharp distinction between thick horizontal lines, very tiny, thin vertical lines, because you can do that with a quill. And in the Ashkenazic scripts, you'll see a lot of very fun, fine things that you can do, and some influence from the Gothic scripts of Northern Europe. And then within the European areas, you get variations. Also within the various Sephardic communities, you get variations. And if you're very good, it's possible to place a Torah as to time and date, knowing details of paleography.
Anyone want to guess when this one's from?
I have a question about the teaching process. When you're teaching, do you mostly concentrate on the technical aspects of making the letters, or is there interspersed in the time the meaning and the traditional aspects of what you're reading? I mean, is it an exploration? What's the process?
You're a learner.
Okay, I'm speaking as the learner, not a teacher yet. I hope to have a student at some point. We did a lot of learning. There's a whole realm of this craft that has nothing to do with the technicalities of the calligraphy, and they all have to do with the laws for how to do the writing. So both how to form the letters, that is how the letters have to be formed. You know, this one can't look too much like the other one, for example, but also a lot of rules about the process of the writing. So stating an intention before you start out loud. There's a special way that God's names have to be written. There's all kinds of laws and rules around the writing, so it's not just the calligraphy. So we actually spent a great deal of time learning those laws together. And in terms of, there was also, the technical aspect. Here you're not doing this line quite right, but that was a lot of practice on my own. And then I could come back and Jen could show me, you're doing this, here's how you do it, here's how you do it better, and then I could go practice that on my own. And I did study on my own too, and we would discuss it, but we also did a lot of the learning together.
Okay. Hi, thanks for coming, and I'm back here. And I love the description of the bookends that you gave. And my question is, if there was a particular passage for each of you that spoke to you. I mean, what of the Torah, was there one moment or a piece where some particular passage, and maybe a little on why?
Do you want to go? I find lots of different passages speak to me in different ways. So the passages, for instance, in Genesis, when it's talking about the lives of these nomads and the things they're doing, as I was saying earlier about the text, you get a different perspective on it when you're writing through it. You have so much time to imagine, what were these people thinking? How are they feeling? What's going on in the story? And thinking about the time I've spent in Israel and the sights and the sounds and how the desert smells. And you have time to think about all these things. So those passages speak to me in that sort of way. And then there are other passages, like most of the book of Leviticus, where you're connecting into something that's that you don't really understand, but it's obviously very old, and it's really central to our identity in a way that's so old we can't even really remember how, but it's there, and that speaks to me in that way. And then you get into the book of, and obviously all of the book of Exodus is, particularly now around Pesach time, when we're thinking about our story as a nation, as a people, that speaks to me in that way. And in the book of Numbers, where there's all those dedication lists of, this tribe gave this tribe gave this, that speaks very much to my life as a modern Jew when we have our announcements in our shul, and it's thanks to such and such for giving this. That speaks to me as a modern Jew very much. When we get to the book of Deuteronomy, and I find the book of Deuteronomy kind of intriguing because it's the retelling by Moses of the previous 4 books, and Moses is saying these things over and over again, and he very much reminds me of my grandpa, sort of, and I told you to do this, and so that speaks to me on a sort of familial level, in a sort of perhaps not 100% respectful, but nonetheless extremely loving sort of way. So there are all these different bits, and there are different connections to all of them. And that's before you get into the whole text learning thing and commentators who connect you in other ways.
Ditto, a lot of passages in all sorts of different ways, sometimes just technical ways. I was just saying there's a couple of words that I was talking to someone else about, a couple of words that they look so nice for some reason. Just really enjoy writing those words. So a verse that has both of those words in it, Vayako melech hadash el Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef, the 2 words that are just so beautiful to write. So there's kind of this technical surface connection there, and sometimes there's a random personal associations with the text. So when there's traveling down to Egypt, when Yosef goes down into Egypt, and he's in a foreign land, and all of a sudden it pops in my head, my passport, I'm going to Canada tomorrow. So different personal associations, but I have to say that probably my favorite, I don't like to choose favorites, but I do, and I have a favorite letter also, which maybe I'll tell you, which it is. It's not. The portions that come up in our liturgy and in songs, so probably sections of Deuteronomy were really the most powerful to write, but also the receiving of the Torah. Yeah, a lot of it. There's not one.
Hi, over here. Hi, Jen. It's me. You're up.
Hey. Gosh, long time no see.
I came a little late, so perhaps you've answered this already, but my goodness, what does it feel like to be amongst the very, very first women to write the Torah and to have now a student as well?
It's not so much the student as now I have a colleague. It's good.
Hello. I'm curious about the balance of what is rigid in writing the Torah and where you have flexibility, because you mentioned you can't just play with the design, and you mentioned that pagination may differ. So, for instance, is every line identical, or do the words flow differently from Torah to Torah? And can you talk a little bit about what the latitude is, or is not?
So Torahs today have become quite standardized. If you look at particularly older Torahs, the word wrap is often different. And one of the skills that a scribe had to acquire was the ability to wrap their words so that things like God's name wouldn't be the last word in the column because that's not nice, and that the Torah would finish at the bottom of a column, and that your columns would all fit onto your parchment and so on. Today's scribes are lucky because partly we have an abundance of parchment, so if we have a piece of parchment if we have like a piece of cow that doesn't fit a nice tidy 4 columns onto it, we don't have to use it, we can just get a piece that will fit 4 columns. And nowadays we have printed books from which to copy that are widely available, so many, many Torahs in the world today will look exactly like this one, but many older ones will not look exactly like this one. In Torah readers are familiar with this when they have a printed tikkun that they're practicing from, and then they go and they read from the Torah scroll and the words are not in the same places, and this confuses people, but it's completely legitimate. But
it's a little sad because it's kind of like the globalization, of Torah, like everything else. It's just becoming kind of more standardized. But there's parameters like this kind of common version of the Torah has 42 lines per column. That's actually the minimum number of lines, and the maximum is 60. So yeah, you'll see these kind of taller Torahs, but these days you mostly see this minimum number of lines. It's 42 line.
And the writing can be bigger or smaller. So you can have tiny, tiny letters or huge, big letters. And the columns can be different widths. Lots of things.
I wanted to ask Julie about her favorite letter. When we were putting letters in the other day, it's very easy to develop a psychological relationship with each of the letters. And so what's...
Yeah. So my favorite letter right now, it's been for a while, my favorite Torah letter is the Pei. And the reason that it's my favorite is because it's 2 in 1, meaning the Pei, when it's written, the ink the black ink creates a Pei, but if you look at the white space inside of the Pei, which is called white fire, the Torah is referred to as black fire on white fire, so on a literal level, this is the black ink on the white parchment. So inside the Pei is a bet. So it's almost hard to, I wish, well,
we can't really see it.
I can't really see it. But it's like looking at an Escher painting. You see it one way, you see it the other way, and it's almost hard to see the Pei. I can't see just the Pei anymore. I see the bet as well, and sometimes I see mostly the bet, mostly the white space inside the Pei.
Hi. I don't want to know the technical part of which I know you've answered a lot of making corrections, but how, I know towards the end or at the end, there was a lot of reviewing and by, I assume, different people, maybe a computer, and I wondered what the experience was like when mistakes were pointed out. Just what was that like for you?
It was pretty straightforward, actually. The proofing did take a while just because of people's schedules, and because it's intensive work. You're reading the whole Torah and checking it. The corrections didn't take me that long. It took probably about less than 3 days to correct them all. But it was fun because I got to see some really interesting mistakes. One of them was I spelled the word wisdom, the word chokhmah, with an extra chet, so it was spelled chokhmah. Anyway, just funny things. It was interesting for me, and I felt the energy. I knew the proofreaders. I knew who they were, and I could kind of tell who had done what page. So I sort of felt their energy as I was making the corrections and as I was looking over their markings, and I felt them as part of this process and as part of making this Torah a legitimate Torah, that is a Torah that is correct, hopefully.
You lucky thing.
Yeah.
I get mine back from a stranger from the computer check, and And I've proofread it through myself so that I hope I've caught things, but then when I didn't catch something, I feel doubly silly. First for being like, I totally knew how to spell that, for goodness sake, Jen. And then secondly, and I didn't catch it. Oy.
This question's for you, Jen. How much time do you spend scribing versus teaching? And down the road, will it be more teaching? And the last question, do you teach men?
I do teach men. Not many men want to be taught by me, but sometimes there's a special man who will.
Dad, are you asking?
I'll teach her brother if she... Yeah, I'll teach her brother if he wants. Yeah. Yeah, and often I encourage men to go and learn with people who are just better than me, partly because you should learn from the best teacher you can find, and partly because I hope that they'll come back with knowledge that I don't have access to and teach me. But I do teach men occasionally, and the scribing teaching balance very much depends on what I'm writing, what I'm contracted to write at any one time, and how many students I have who want to learn. So if I have a deadline crunching, I might be really irresponsible and cancel class. But if I don't have anything particular that I'm working on, then I might spend a couple of hours in the afternoon writing an email to somebody who's learning long distance, and then I might go and teach for 3 hours in Manhattan. And it really depends. And hopefully in the future, the balance will stay about the same, because there will be more of us writing, but also more of us teaching.
I have, I think, a two-part question for Julie. When the Torah project began, it was a totally new experience for our community and for the museum, and our guests coming through the museum coming from a very diverse background. So could you tell me what were some of the what are the anecdotes that you would carry away from this experience, number one, and what were some of the questions that were asked of you that you will remember always?
There were some good ones. One person actually, this was towards the beginning of the project. Her question was, so is this something that men also do, or is it really just a women's? Because she didn't have any background. She didn't know, and so the example that she sees is a woman writing the Torah. So the assumption then is this is the norm. So I said, yeah, men do this too. And then I'm not dressed exactly like I was dressed on this day, but can you see what I'm wearing? I was asked, do you always wear that costume? Is this a scribe's costume?
That's so rude.
To which I replied, no, this is my outfit. There were really some fantastic. Oh, so what are some of the other funny ones? Give me a second. I'll think of maybe one more funny one after.
I'll fill in with an anecdote. I tell people that scribes traditionally wear black and white because if you get ink on your black stuff, it doesn't show, and if you get it on your white stuff, you can bleach it. So, yeah.
I'd like to say something to Julie. You know, I came quite a few times when you were here. And the first time I came with my daughter, and it was normal that we would want to do it together, and it was very interesting. And then I shared what Ruthie and I had done by hearing you speak and the questions that you asked. And I shared it with some of my friends. And quite a few of them are not Jewish. And they called me up and they said, Sophie, we want to come and hear too. Is it okay? And I said, yeah. Of course it's okay. This is a contemporary Jewish museum. It's okay. And we usually sat in the first row there, and one of my friends, she said nothing, and I knew she wanted to say, but she still had it. So I gave her a little nudge. And so she asked you a question. And so I want to tell you that not only was, I'm sure, very difficult for you to answer these questions all the time, and then you have to go back. It was a long process, and I appreciate it and really respect you and thank the museum for doing that. But what you did was not only for yourself by learning about yourself and by having a teacher like you have, but you also taught others, Jewish, not Jewish. And so I think this is something that's beyond maybe what you had thought, but you were hoping for, and it is happening. It is. And so this is my way of saying, on behalf of my friends who came, and that they were okay to ask the questions, and you were answering them so well. Thank you, and keep on doing that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we have a special guest. And we just figured this out just before we started. So who is bringing our guest out?
I think Derek.
Okay.
Yay.
Julie or Jen, do you want to say something about what we should do when the guest arrives?
So we thought that people might like to see the baby up close. So she's going to be brought in, and we're going to pop her on that table. Julie and I are going to stay there with her for a little while, so I expect if there are more questions, we will be able to answer them until we drop off exhaustion. But when the Torah is moving around, to show respect for the Torah, we rise. So please rise.
Where is the Torah going?
I'll add something to that. The Torah is going to be traveling to different synagogues. We're right now in the process of having a new mantle commissioned by an artist named Lynn Avadenko, who's creating a special mantle for this Torah that will then tour with it. And then we hope, this is not a Torah that will stay in a museum's collection. It's a Torah actually that we wanted to create that could be used by people not only locally but around the world as well.
And I want to just take a moment to thank Jen, thank Julie, thank everyone for coming. And as you take a look at the new baby, please remember that we are about to start our a kind of a siyum or a completion of this project, and there is food and music and maybe even some dancing. So join us for both things.
Can I just say one last thing? I want to. It's been a while. It's been almost a year and a half, I guess, since this started, and I just want to thank everyone at the museum and everyone in the community that has supported this project. It's been amazing to be part of it, and I want to express my gratitude and appreciation for all of your support. So thank you.